Hey folks, this is Rhykker, and the Diablo 4 expansion and its price continues to be a topic that a lot of people are discussing right now. You see, 2 weeks ago, YouTuber Legendary Drops released a video called "No Blizzard, a Diablo 4 expansion isn't worth $100." And this was in reference to an alleged leaked survey, and we call it an alleged leaked survey because it's not been proven to be a real leak. Someone could have made it up, but it was reported on initially by Belialar News, and as far as I'm aware, no one else has ever come forward to corroborate this alleged leaked survey. Personally, I do believe it is legit, but we spoke about that weeks ago. And again, in this survey, Blizzard was asking questions, or Blizzard's marketing department, or what have you, were asking questions revolving around pricing points for bundling an expansion with different add-ons. And so there was at least one package priced at $100 that included XYZ additional add-ons. Now, it is worth mentioning that in their latest campfire chat, the D4 devs, or specifically Adam Fletcher, the lead community manager, he brought up, or he alluded to, the survey and effectively debunked it, or just said that not to worry about that. But that was specifically more about the potential pay to win that we were seeing in the contents of that survey, and they just reassured us that there will continue to not be any pay to win in Diablo 4. And again, we'll affirm that I don't believe anyone actually thinks Blizzard will charge $100 for just the base content of an expansion. There's a distinction between the just base version of the expansion and then whatever version, deluxe, super deluxe edition, super collector, sell it on eBay in 10 years edition of the game. But we're framing this around what is the worth of an expansion, regardless of what that may be, whether it's 100, whether it's 50, whether it's 60, 70. Legendary Drops basically feels that no matter what the price is, it's not worth it to him unless it's going to be, presumably, I mean, he didn't make this explicit, but presumably unless it's like $10, $20, that it's just not worth it, that the game and the devs have not earned the right to charge for an expansion when they are still improving fundamental aspects of the game. We reacted to his video in this long reaction video over here. We went through a lot of points, and now Legendary Drops has released an update video after having seen feedback from a lot of commenters, and as well seeing the reaction videos of myself and Asmongold and DM Microtransactions and presumably others as well. So he has now released a video saying, "So I was wrong about the Diablo 4 expansion, ? And in this video, he addresses some common rebuttals that he was getting to his points. So I'm going to express my thoughts on some of the things that are brought up in this video. Again, I encourage you to check out the original video. It's 16 minutes.
Today, what I want to do is I actually want to focus in on some of those discussions because I think it's worth having. Because I may not change the hearts and minds of everybody, but if I can change the hearts and minds of a few, well, then maybe we can get better games as a result in years to come. So we're going to listen to the people that disagree with me today.
One thing worth, I suppose, pointing out here is he has just made explicit that he does have an agenda. So his objective is to persuade you to his point of view. There's nothing wrong with that, and he is being upfront about it. But his stance is basically, the expansion is not worth it, and I'm going to convince you as to why that is the case. To be clear up front on my stance, I'm not here to convince you one way or the other. I'm here to just tell you, if you don't think you'll get your money's worth, don't buy it. If you do think you'll get your money's worth, buy it.
A common complaint that I saw is how unfair and disingenuous it was for me to compare Diablo 4 to Path of Exile, as Path of Exile has had 10 years of content to improve upon itself and continue to add things over time, where Diablo 4 has only been out for less than a year. So yes, this complaint is actually true. They are right. I am wrong in this from a very narrow perspective. A less than a year-old Diablo 4 versus a 10-year-old Path of Exile is an unfair comparison in a world without context. But we don't live in a world without context. And in this matter, context is king.
Pause it right there. I am one of the people that makes this argument, but I make it in a very specific context. And I don't know if things are getting conflated here, but and it's possible other people are arguing it in a different way. But when I make this comparison, or at least the comparison that I make when I'm talking about 10 years of PoE, I'm making a very specific argument regarding content. And it's a specific rebuttal to the argument that I would see of people saying that Diablo 4 has no content in it. There's nothing to do And they compare it to PoE that has 80 billion things that have been added to the game to do. And it's in that specific lens that I put out the rebuttal that Diablo 4 launched with more content in it than any ARPG has ever launched with. And when I'm talking about content, I'm talking about how many bosses, how many dungeons, how many things there are to do to progress through. And that's not a statement on the quality of that content. It's not a statement on the depth or complexity of the content, right? You can have a TV series that's 20 episodes and a TV series that's 5 episodes. The one with 20 episodes has more content. Doesn't mean it's better, there's just more. And generally when a game is being developed, that's when you're focusing on some major structural things that you're putting into place. You can be doing major revisions, so it's not the time to be adding a ton of content when you could be making changes that are going to just screw over all that extra work you did. Once the game is in a good state and launched, then you're in a position where you can easily, or you optimally, ideally, should be easily adding content. So again, in that particular lens, it's unfair to say, well, how much content is there in Diablo 4 compared to an ARPG that has been out for 10 years? It is entirely fair to be critical of the quality of the content.
Diablo series spawned the loot-driven subgenre within ARPGs, aspiring numerous titles to emulate its formula, including Path of Exile.
All right, in this next section, he's talking about how Blizzard has been making games for 30 years. They effectively made the RPG genre. They made the defining game. And Path of Exile was this little company that came out of nowhere, effectively making the very, 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 very fair point that you expect more and better.
So now with context, I propose this question. What do we have for now almost 30 years of Diablo? For a 10-year development cycle for Diablo 4, we got a decent feeling RPG that looked really good. It had awesome looking cutscenes. Story was pretty decent. No loot filters, brain dead boss design, boring loot, no endgame variety, and a now deserted open world MMO light.
I largely agree with this point. I'm going to make one small point of disagreement on the loot filters, simply because I don't believe a loot filter is necessary in an ARPG. It's necessary in most ARPGs that we have today, but a loot filter is specifically a solution to a problem. It's a good solution, and a lot of modern ARPGs have really good loot filters. I personally would rather an ARPG that is designed in a way that we don't need loot filters, that we solve the problem before we have to start adding loot filters. And that the problem specifically is too much stuff drops that we don't care about. That's the specific problem. Now, if Diablo 4 was a game that did not need loot filters, then that it would not be a problem that it didn't have loot filters. Unfortunately, we do need loot filters in Diablo 4 because we are in a state where there's far too much stuff that drops that we don't care about. So, yes, it would be good for Diablo 4 to have a loot filter because it did not fix the underlying problem. And then as for everything else that he's making as his point here, it's completely valid, right? Blizzard made the ARPG. Diablo 2 was the formula. It was the foundation. It was what every other successful ARPG based themselves on as a point of origin. It is fully acceptable to expect and hope and desire that Blizzard would be the company to reclaim the crown of the ARPG and move that genre forward. That is fully acceptable of an expectation to have of Blizzard as a company. Now, the individual devs working on Diablo 4, how many of them worked on Diablo 1 and Diablo 2? The answer is either 0 or close to 0. How many of them worked on Diablo 3? A fair number, but still. I cannot fault individual devs who were not the ones to have actually made Diablo 2. But that doesn't mean Blizzard as an entire company is innocent here. Because someone hired people. Someone built teams. People were making decisions over who to bring onto the team and who not to. A company with the reputation and money of Blizzard that effectively can pull from a worldwide talent that had access to bring in the world's best ARPG designers did not do so, did not bring in the veterans of the genre. For whatever reason, did not bring in people like the Schaefer brothers and Brevik as even consultants. And I'm not saying that if we had all of those veterans of Diablo working on D4, that the game would have been perfect. Maybe it would have even been worse. Who knows? But if you are the only company in the world that is literally able to bring together the dream team, that you can say we have brought together all of the best veteran ARPG developers in the world to make this ARPG, or at the very least just be able to say that you had them as consultants, why not leverage that? And again, obviously I have some bias towards the founders of Diablo, so let's extend it outward. There have been other really solid, robust ARPGs either released or in development. Why not headhunt the best, most successful ARPG devs? Why not try to scoop up GGG when they were in their infancy? Why not try to grab some of the last Epoch devs? Why not? I don't know. As far as I'm aware, I don't know of any people on the Diablo team that were brought over from other competing solid ARPGs. You know, just last year, summer 2022, Blizzard bought Proletariat. It was a 100-person studio running a mage-based battle royale game called Spellbreak, and they put them to work on World of Warcraft. Try to imagine a universe in which, when Path of Exile was in its infancy, Blizzard had bought Grinding Gear Games. It can't happen now because they're big and successful on their own, but I can almost guarantee you that there was some time long ago when Chris Wilson and Jonathan Rogers would have been delighted to work on Diablo 4. And it's not to say that it's all those people who should be in charge and making all the calls, but having their input, I think, would be extremely valuable. In the same way that the community now post-launch has been helping to shape Diablo 4's development, having the voices of veteran developers internally before launch maybe could have curtailed a lot of these things that now the community is bringing up. My only point here is that Blizzard as a company could have done more to retain its veteran ARPG developers or bring on veteran ARPG developers. Do you need veterans to make a good game? Absolutely not, because plenty of other successful ARPGs proved otherwise. But if you have the resources to bring on veterans, why wouldn't you?
Is it wrong of me to expect more of a $70 billion studio? Is it wrong of me to expect more, or is it unfair of me to compare when the studio we're talking about is the grandfather of the genre itself? No, it's not. That's the reason why I'm upset, and many other players are upset too, is because it should still be more than what it is. That's not to say that the game won't get better over time, but that still doesn't justify us spending more money until they get that game to what it should be. And it still lacks that something that wants to make you keep coming back to it.
He's very eloquent. And he's very persuasive in the way he makes his arguments. He is perfectly entitled to that stance. I personally am of the opinion that if you are enjoying something, you can spend your money however you want. I don't feel like anyone should feel like they ought to take a moral, principled stance here. It's recreation. We're not talking about saving starving children here. If you are personally enjoying something that is not harmful to other people, and it is entertainment, and you want to spend more money on enjoying that entertainment, you shouldn't feel bad about that. If you're not enjoying the game, and you're unhappy with the game, then yeah, don't spend money on the game. But if you're enjoying the game, and you feel you're getting your money's worth, don't feel bad about spending more money on it. All right, the next section, he's acknowledging that Blizzard did improve the game over time. A lot of people were telling him that he should have pointed that out. So he acknowledged that the game has improved.
We don't need to spend money for them to improve games. And that's something that we've been doing for far too long, and it needs to stop.
I don't know how much I agree with the point that we have been giving money to developers for far too long so that they improve games. I don't know. Is there a substantial number of people that are unhappy with the game and keep feeding the devs money, thinking or hoping or believing that it's going to get better? If they do, I would discourage that. Again, my stance is if you're enjoying something, feel free to keep spending money on enjoying it. If you're not enjoying something, don't keep spending money on that. Why would you do that? Just don't let someone try to convince you that you're not enjoying something. If you like to spend $15 on a McDonald's meal and you enjoy that, then don't let someone else tell you, oh, McDonald's is trash. You should be spending your money at Burger King instead. You can try Burger King, but don't feel shamed into not getting McDonald's anymore.
Now, the last thing that I want to tackle are sentiments that were shared by both Rhykker and Asmongold, and this has to do with the complexity and depth of Diablo 4 and how it doesn't really need to position itself as a competitor because it doesn't have the same target audience. Diablo 4 is meant to be a more casual game than PoE. And the way that I worded my arguments about that, well, kind of left me open to this, so I want to clarify. Path of Exile is far too complex and complicated for the layman and honestly even veterans of the genre. I just recently started playing the game in earnest with its last season.
I wouldn't say it's too complicated for veterans. Definitely too complicated for laymen. For veterans, it could be too complicated, but it could also be exactly what they're looking for.
When I brought up the value proposition between Diablo 4 and Path of Exile, what I was trying to really show off was the comparing and contrasting of meaningful progression. Diablo 4 lacks it completely. Personally, this is my opinion, but when I look at Diablo 4, I see Nightmare Dungeons basically being the exact same thing as Greater Rifts. I look at the Tree of Whispers as basically just a reimagined version of the adventure mode.
Bounties.
And the open world lacks really any thoughtful design whatsoever. At least in Path of Exile, with all the different systems that it has, there's meaningful ways to progress your character, whether that's through the labyrinth, being able to access a more specialized tree of skills.
Path of Exile definitely has more meaningful progression systems in it. In fairness, a lot of those were added over time, but yes, I do wish that D4 launched with more meaningful progression. Last Epoch is going to be launching with more meaningful endgame progression than D4 currently has. Like, I wish that the Nightmare Dungeons were tied together into some form of meta progression system similar to maps in Path of Exile or I think it's called the Monolith in Last Epoch. Even Torchlight Infinite. People don't believe me that I play this game. I don't play it a ton, but I play it consistently over the past couple of years. Has more meaningful progression systems built into its endgame.
But there's nothing to learn in Diablo. It's just go kill stuff. Hopefully you get a higher number. Okay, you got higher number. Good job. Maybe you can beat Lilith now. There's just nothing to it. And while I realize that this game is supposed to be for a much more simpler audience, for people that aren't looking for something ultra complex, that doesn't mean it shouldn't have meaning.
I think as well it's fair for these systems to just come online much later, right? While yes, overall the target audience is, we'll call it more casual, whatever. A lot of these people get filtered out like before the highest levels. By the time you get to the highest levels of play, in general, you could have more depth there, right? You keep introducing the depth over time, and D4 does a fair job of that as well, right? Like Paragon only coming online at a certain point. And at the higher levels of play, I think it's perfectly fine to add more of that depth and complexity right now. I don't think it would be overly complex for the kind of game D4 is to have one of these meta progression systems at the very end.
For me, Diablo 4 doesn't have meaning. All in all, I expect more.
And that's the word meaning, right? So D3 lacks this as well. Why am I doing Greater Rifts over and over? Why am I doing Nightmare Dungeons over and over? Just to make number go up. There's no greater context. Again, maps and PoE, there's some greater context to why you're doing these maps. They're contributing towards some greater progression. I call it meta progression because it's not personally enhancing the power of your character. Like, levels and Paragon points, those are progression systems. Meta progression is the term that I use to refer to a system that is not furthering the power of your character, but it's furthering some other thing. So in this case, the maps in PoE, you're building towards something. I guess technically it is ultimately tied to your character, but it's not directly tied to your character's power. You're trying to complete your atlas. In Last Epoch, you're building your monolith of fate. These things are all connected to being able to get more character power, but they're not directly improving your character's power. Whereas in D3 and D4, why am I doing dungeons or greater rifts? Well, you can do the same one over and over. It doesn't really matter. There's no real reason to go do different ones other than just you're working with whatever drops for you. There's no real reason to push higher ones, higher levels, other than just getting more XP per hour or more drops per hour. So it all lacks a certain meaning.
I feel that loot and builds need to be a little bit more interesting, and the game still lacks that something intangible that really wants to drive you to play it. Now again, they definitely have improved the game since Season 2, and Season 3 can take it even further, but regardless of the improvements that they make in a year, for me personally, and I would hope for many others, that's not enough for me to justify buying the game all over again. These are MMO expansion prices or higher. And for me, that's way too much, too early, for too little work. But that's just for me, and it could be different for you. But I do hope that having discussions like these do help people try to make smarter purchasing decisions in the future. Be a little bit more patient. Hold out a little bit longer because we're going to get better games as a result. Opening our wallets to that much money so quickly doesn't make a lot of sense to me. That's the whole reason I made the video in the first place.
Well, we'll add. So on top of what I've said about, if you're enjoying something, it's fine to spend money on it. Make emotionless purchases. All of your purchases in life should be grounded in logic and never in emotion. So don't get swept up into hype. Don't buy something just because, you got excited by the marketing. Evaluate, do I really think I'm going to get my money's worth when it launches? Do I really feel like I need to be part of the cultural zeitgeist at the time where everyone's talking about the release of this game, and if I'm not playing it, then I'm not part of that, right? Because that's fair, right? It is fair that some people like to be part of when something happens, they're in on it. That's important to some people, not to everyone. Some people don't care, right? But I call back to Game of Thrones when the Red Wedding happened. I felt out of the loop. I wasn't watching Game of Thrones, and I saw my coworkers and everyone, and they were all experiencing this moment together, and I didn't get to share that. And I regretted it later when I actually watched Game of Thrones, that I wasn't able to fully enjoy that cultural moment. And I'm someone who doesn't generally get swept up or care about that kind of stuff. But if you're someone who it doesn't matter to you if you play the game like a year later, like wait for a sale, wait to see what reviews are, wait for the game to come to Game Pass. Ask yourself, do I need to be playing this right now? Am I willing to risk a bad game? Am I fine spending money and it turns out to be bad just so that I'm part of that moment? And the answer to that could be yes. So I think we're about wrapping this up here. But basically, his core message, he's coming from the point of view of someone who does not enjoy Diablo 4, or at least doesn't enjoy it nearly enough to feel that he got his money's worth. And so from that position, yeah, why spend more money on a game that you're not happy with? And I would encourage anyone else who is not happy and not enjoying D4, yeah, why would you spend more money on it in the form of an expansion? At the very least, wait for it to release, see what reviews are, see what people are saying, see what has actually improved with the expansion before you even consider spending money on it. But by the same token, even if you don't think the game is perfect and you are enjoying it, don't be shamed into not buying the expansion. I think one of the greatest shames in life is when you're enjoying something and then other people poop on that thing and then you can't enjoy that thing anymore. How often has it happened to you folks that you watch a movie, you enjoyed that movie, you go on the internet and apparently it's the worst movie in the world, and now you feel bad about yourself. And you try not to make all the negativity influence your opinion. And depending on who you are, maybe you're not going to be influenced at all, but maybe some of you are not going to like that movie as much anymore. Let people enjoy the things that they enjoy. But that about wraps up my take on things. I encourage you folks to go check out the video by Legendary Drops. It's just 16 minutes. And leave a comment down here on your thoughts on all this. What is your position? Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhyker's Raiders for more gaming content.